Good morning and welcome to Channel 1 News Check, today being the 13th day of May 2020, and it's exactly 2 months since we reported our first coronavirus case right here in the country. Hope you're keeping safe. As I said, keep safe, keep the distance, and of course keep the faith. We will trounce this coronavirus. Welcome, my name is Ben Troy Njue, and I'll be hosting you till around 12, and we will be discussing something very crucial at this moment. They say when it rains, it pours, but in Kenyan context, when it rains, it floods. Well, we have been having a perennial water shortage and flooding when the water comes or when the rains come. So what is the lasting solution? We will be discussing water sustainability, and especially in urban areas amidst a COVID-19 pandemic, which is of course causing a lot of problems in all sectors, and sanitation and hygiene measures during times of this pandemic. And I'm joined in studio. I'll be joined in studio by two very formidable gentlemen to discuss this issue. But first things first, we have a look at what our reporters are also preparing as we speak in our reporter's diary. We will be getting to that much later. But as I've said, we'll be talking about water and especially provision. You know, when it rains, it pours, but when it's not there, it's quite dry. On my extreme left, of course, keeping the distance, we have Abugo Anthony, who is the CEO of Water Services Providers Association, or WASPA. And on my immediate left, we have Edward Gedaiga, who is a youth leader at the National Youth Council. Gentlemen, karibuni.
Thank you.
Mr. Abungo, I think I'll start with you. I also don't have water at my place. What's happening?
Where is your place?
Thika Road.
Okay. Just within Nairobi?
Yes, Kahawa actually.
Okay. Now, I think we are all aware that apart from the pandemic which is affecting us, we have also had floods affecting different parts of the country. I'm not the right person to talk about it because that falls under the jurisdiction of the Managing Director of Nairobi Water.
Yes.
But being within the umbrella body, I'll have to comment.
Yes.
Nairobi itself has no source of water of its own. We get it from Sasamua, that is in Nyandarua, Ndakaini, and also from the Kikuyu Springs. So what has happened, occasioned by the floods, we have also had issues of landslide. So a good proportion of the water infrastructure has been washed away. And this morning when I was talking to one of the senior officers, it will take at least 2 weeks because the pipeline is within the forest. So there is no access road. So Athi Water Works Development Agency is also assisting first to create access before the pipes are repaired. Now, when it comes to Ngedu treatment plant, one of the major treatment plants that supplies Nairobi, it's also affected because with the landslides, you have a lot of mud coming down. You have water that is coming to the intake being blocked with a lot of, you have trees and other logs that are being brought in. So what is happening occasionally is that once the screens are blocked, they have to stop the pumping and remove it. So it is both on and off. So these are some of the challenges that we are facing as utilities, and that is why we have insisted to our customers that for us to undertake this, then they really need to pay their bills. It's not only Nairobi. I think Tuesday last week to Russia, which serves a greater proportion of Nakuru town and Nakuru rural. Also, some section of the pipe was swept away by the floods, but they were able to fix it in around, they had a downtime of 6 days. So you realize you have to bring in the pipes, put them in place. Again, you have also to ensure that they are held firmly with concrete. So it takes some time to cure so that it is firm, because you know such water goes under great pressure. So these are some of the challenges that are affecting us, and I know it has badly hit the Nairobians, and what we want to assure them is that every effort is being put in place to ensure that water is restored.
And perhaps before putting the cart in front of the horse, what exactly is the mandate of WASPA, Water Services Providers Association?
Now, thank you. WASPA was formed in 2002. And in 2002, that is when we had the water reforms. And we had a new architectural framework in the water sector. So in that architectural framework, different institutions were given different mandates. We had the Ministry of Water and Irrigation that time. It has come back, but it has a component of sanitation, dealing with the policy formulation. Then there was the water services subsector, where we fall in, and the water resources subsector. So just to cut the long story short is that the municipal councils by that time, remember there was the local government in 2002, and this was repealed before we went to elections. That is in 2013, to allow in for the two levels of government, I think. So what happened is that each municipal council formed a company to improve efficiency in terms of water service provision. So by that time, companies were formed, like Nairobi City Council formed Nairobi City Water and Sewerage. Mombasa also formed Mombasa Water. So that is how it came. But now, the utilities now were confronted by new challenges because they were not the one offering this service. So they created a platform, and the three utilities that were formed initially was, we have Nyeri, Kericho, and Eldoras. So they created a platform where members from these water service providers will share experiences. They would exchange knowledge, and that is when WASPA was born, just to advocate for issues that pertain to members and their sustainability. So the mission now for WASPA is to ensure that we facilitate. We do not provide water and sanitation services, but we facilitate an enabling environment for our members so that they can provide or they can prosecute their mandate. And what is their mandate? Provision of water and sanitation services. And this one comes from various angles, because locally you will find that the county governments that have now been given the mandate under Schedule 4 of water sanitation service provision will come up with CIDPs. Then they'll have to ensure that they fit now into the blueprint that we have, which is Vision 2030. And in Kenya, it is elaborate that we have now recognized the importance of water in this country, and it is now in the Constitution, sitting in Article 43 of the Constitution. So here the mandate is to ensure that every Kenyan has a right of access to safe, clean water in adequate quantities. Not only that, if you go further down, it talks about now reasonable standards of sanitation. So at the international level, we have SDG number 6. So we have to ensure that our members are able to keep track in accelerating and achieving SDG number 6, which talks about universal coverage of safe drinking water and sanitation to the entire populace within the agenda of 2030. So our mandate is facilitating that enabling environment. How do we do it? We do it through advocacy. We do also through capacity building. We identify the gaps that exist in utilities. And in terms of training, by looking at their training needs assessment, once we identify the gaps, they become our training goals. And because we are not a training institution, what we do, we identify reputable training institutions who are able to undertake this training. I'll give you an example. And when the companies were formed, even before the municipalities were running water supplies, we had a large workforce which came into the system. But most of these people were not technically qualified. But over the years, like the plumbers, the artisans, they have gathered a lot of experience. So what we have done, we have identified that they need vocational training. And we have partnered up with KEWI and the Federal Republic of Germany. And we are now, a curriculum has been developed where we are now doing on-job training to them, just to increase, to improve on their skills. Because technologies have changed. We used to use PVC, but now we have HDPE, which is long, much stronger than the PVC.
Is it still the same material?
The pipe, yes, the piping. So this one is not very, very fragile. A vehicle can pass over it without breaking, and it's very long. You know, the normal one is around 3 meters, 20 feet, and you see, then you have a lot of joints. The more the joints, the more the leakages. So this one comes in very long spirals, and it takes a number of years. The joining is different to just weld away illegal connections.
Yes.
For example, if you have to weld an HDPE, it is very different the way you do the PVC.
Yes.
Every Tom, Dick, and Harry would join a PVC. But when you come to HDPE, so these are some of the technologies and innovations we are bringing into the sector, just to bring traction in terms of accelerating access to water. Okay. So our mandate basically purely is to facilitate that enabling environment. We also create a platform where utilities can come and share experiences. Like Nyeri Water Company is one of the best companies. I don't know, people don't talk about it. But we can tell you that as much as we have problems in other places, in Nyeri town, it's 100% covered.
Okay.
It's 100%.
Nyeri town.
And it is one of the best utilities in Africa. Their non-revenue water is less than 17%. So what we are talking about is that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have created a platform where utilities can come and share experience. If Nyeri has done it, other companies in the Republic can do it. So that is a platform that we have already created for our members. And that is why we have a lot of exchanges.
Okay. We will get to that, and basically all Kenyans would want to know what is Nyeri doing right. But before then, karibu sana Bwana Githaiga.
Thank you very much.
National Youth Council.
Yes.
Kindly, briefly, in 2 minutes,
Yep.
Tell us exactly the mandate.
All right. National Youth Council was established under the Act of Parliament 2009 in 2009. And the National Youth Council is a state corporate body. However, it is autonomous. Okay. When I say autonomous, it has its independence. It has a level of its independence. And how does it gain that level of independence? From the government.
And from the Ministry of Youth, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's called a semi-autonomous body. So it's half government and half public, like the interest group. Maybe it's more advanced than Maendeleo Wanawake in the sense of policy and its structure, because it's really a government kind of support. And this National Youth Council came about because of the 2007 election violence. Okay. When Kofi Annan came to Kenya, one of the major things that was highlighted in Agenda 4, I think, was the issue of youth. And we realized that the young people are the ones who killed, maimed, raped, evicted, and did the horrendous things that affected this country. It wasn't the people who were old. So they saw it in their wisdom in that committee to give the youth space so that the youth can be able to run their own agenda and can be able to discuss pertinent issues that affect them. Because at that time, the youth, after Kofi Annan went around and took views of the people, and the commission came up with the findings, they said that the youth said they were venting because they didn't have the space, because they didn't have the mobility, they didn't have the resources, the money. And all the youth are seeing, 70% of them are seeing rich people are minority or very few, and the majority are poor people, are the young people who are bearing the heavy brunt. They are the young families, young people who are going to get affected one way or another by the ills of society. So when it was established, it was supposed to be the oversight body on every issue touching to youth affairs. However, that has been a major challenge because, as you know, the youth also have to be responsible. The youth also have to be sitting there knowing what their agenda is. And in one way or another, we did deviate from our agenda. But what we are saying as a National Youth Council in Kenya is that even with the political, because we're non-political, but we're asking the youth to be given their space. So that the youth, even this COVID-19, yes, the youth should get their space so that they can be able to say what they need to do for themselves. Yes. You know, even a child is spoon-fed for a certain period of time. Yes. And then you let the child move on. Okay. So this is what the National Youth Council is there as a body for. Yeah, is to ensure that the voice of the youth is heard.
And of course, the youths are involved in the water industry.
Exactly,
especially water vending.
I was listening to the gentleman say here. I would like to challenge him and ask him in the water board sectors and in other associations, you as that organization in the service, how many youth are really involved? And not only that, this piping, don't look at the piping as important. Look at the people who will place the piping, who are the youth. So when you're going for more technology, we also want you to have the heart of the youth in mind. So that even right now, as you're saying, you're cutting the forest or you're making a way, who are you using? Are you using the local community?
Edward, we will get to that because I'm quite sure we've been given at least something to hold on to.
Sure.
And in case you're joining us, this is News Check, and today we are discussing matters of water, sanitation, provision, and of course, currently there are floods, and there are also a big challenge to water provision in the country. And in our viewpoint question, we are asking, should the current floods be declared a national disaster? Some legislators and leaders from the Western have actually urged the government to declare it a national disaster so that more resources can be pumped. We have over 100 people dead as we speak. Thousands have been displaced, and a lot of property has been destroyed. And also, we have also our reporters who are on the ground tackling some of the issues. Let's have a look at the reporter's diary. Welcome back, and let's keep this interactive at KBC Channel 1 at Ben Troy Njue, and of course on our Facebook, we are KBC Channel 1. Your comment, your suggestion, or even where you are watching us from. Remember the viewpoint question again, we ask, should the current floods be declared a national disaster? We have even leaders from corners of this republic requesting the government, kindly, let's have a look, more incisive look at the floods, because they not only actually inconvenience a lot of Kenyans, but also inconvenience service provision, and water being one of those services is something that we are discussing. Again, at KBC Channel 1 at Ben Troy Njue. You can also log in to our Facebook fan page. We are live, and also on KBC, www.kbc.co.ke. Gentlemen, yes. I remember, Abugo, you've talked about Nyeri being one of the best water companies in the country, and we've talked about Nyeri town having 100% water water coverage.
That is
coverage,
the town,
right?
not the entire county.
Not the entire,
because the county is big, yes.
Oh, yes, okay.
Yes.
Coverage, 100% of Nyeri town covered. What is Nyeri water doing right?
Now, I think this one goes back to what I can call governance issues. And I think different schools of thought have come to agree at the end of the day that the water crisis is not a crisis of water. It is a crisis of governance. UNDP affirmed this in 2008. That is 12 years ago. So it depends in how you put the institutional framework together to govern water resources, and that is the major challenge.
Okay, before then, today being the 13th day of May, we are exactly 2 months since the first coronavirus case was reported right here in Kenya, and now we are at 715. But what are some of the tips? What are some of the things you are supposed to look out for, or you should be knowing? Let's have a look.
At the household level, masks can be disposed of in pit latrines. They can also be disposed of in pits, where upon disposal, the waste or the masks are covered with the soil. Where we have organized systems at community level, then waste from households can be pulled together with the guidance of our environmental public health officers or public health technicians who are managing established systems, especially at the community level. At that level, waste can be collected centrally and transported to the nearest health facilities for further management. The waste at that level, where we have organized systems, is recommended to be separately collected in special or specialized liner bags. We should be, when 3/4 full, tied properly and transported to the designated place for further transportation.
Welcome back. Keep clean, keep the distance, keep the faith. Welcome back. Okay, Mr. Abungo, we had talked about, let's use the Nyeri situation, the 100% town coverage. What is the situation in other towns?
Now, I can talk because they are varied, but we can talk nationally.
Yes.
Because the national coverage is not very attractive. We are at 57%. And we are talking about 88 regulated utilities because water sector is regulated. Yes. So 70 of these are our members. So these are utilities that serve in a service area having a population of around 22 million. But the service coverage within the population of 22 million is around 12.9 million. So we are talking of around 2 million connections. Conversely, look at electricity, 7 million connections. So that begs the big question, do we have, as a nation, our priorities right? Because you find that even in fighting this pandemic, you realize that water and sanitation service provision, including hygiene, is on the front line in terms of protecting human life. And the first thing we are saying is that everybody should wash hands against running water. Yes. So that is the first line. So, and that one puts utility on the front line. But you realize that the coverage is not sufficient. So what have we done?
Yes.
We have been forced to go out of our way and start employing the use of water tracking, water boozers, which is very, very expensive. And the government has given proclamations, it has given directives, it has given protocols. We have been forced to abide because, like, when you are looking at the vulnerable people in the informal settlement, you talk of Kibra, you go to Mombasa, you talk of Bombolulu, Kericho, you talk of Nyagacho, Siaya, Awelo. So these are some of the informal settlements that do not have good access to water. The access in the informal settlements is low. So this is where now a lot of water tracking business is taking place. So, and this is where you realize where water is very, very critical in terms of fighting the pandemic. And as I can tell you is that water service provision in Kenya is not funded from the exchequer. It is the bill that the customer or the consumer pays that is used towards operation and maintenance. We have to pay Kenya Power monthly a bill of around 250 million. We have to buy chemicals, different types of chemicals, at around maybe 200 million. You can see now Nairobi is heavily affected because the water that is coming in is very turbid. So you cannot use the normal treatment chemical that you use, that is alum, which is around 40 shillings per kg. You now have to use a polymer, which is around 400 shillings per kg. So it's very expensive. Polymer and chlorine are not in this country.
Will this reflect in our bills?
Yes, it is, but what I can say is that water is heavily subsidized. It is there, though supported, because water is regulated. Our prices, our tariffs are fixed by, approved by the regulator. So we developed our tariffs, but the regulator will come in and check to ensure there is consumer protection. And I can say without fear of contradiction that water supplied through the pipe remains the cheapest, safe, available source of water. Because 0 to 6,000 liters, which if we convert is 350 liters, is between 200 shillings per month and 600. So if somebody who lives in an informal settlement and doesn't have access, will access a jerrycan from 30 shillings. So I want to say before the national television that we are not private water service providers.
Okay. Just a minute. You talked about the being, of course, in the industry. The water industry, water vending. Perhaps I should start with you, Edward. The youth form a bulk of the population, and when it comes to water, when it comes to car washes, when it comes to water vendors, what is the National Youth Council doing? Because at least they have been affected as we speak. But before you do that, let's have a look at what the floods are doing in the country.
Thousands of families affected by heavy rains in various parts of the country remain vulnerable, even as the country battles the COVID-19 pandemic. In Mandera County, at least 7,000 families are living in the cold after River Daua on the Kenya-Ethiopia border burst its banks. Flash floods from the Ethiopian highlands are said to have caused extensive damage to property and infrastructure. In a move to cushion the affected families, Mandera Governor Ali Roba, the county and national governments, in conjunction with other development partners, have distributed relief food to displaced families.
We appeal to the Cabinet Secretary for Ministry of Devolution and Asals to complement our effort through provision of additional food and non-food items.
Elsewhere, residents living in Baringo South constituency, especially Ngambo, Sintan, Salabani, Nasukro and Leswa areas, have been forced to seek alternative accommodation after their homes were flooded. Heavy rains have caused the water level in 3 lakes to increase, forcing the people living around to vacate their homes. Baringo South Member of Parliament Charles Kamuren has called on the national government to declare floods a national disaster in order for the government to allocate funds to alleviate the suffering of Kenyans living in flood-prone areas.
You can see right now what's happening all across this nation and what's happening right now. The floods is taking institutions like the Ministry of Education. In my constituency, 5 schools is taken by the extension of the lakes as a result of the floods.
In Kiambu County, over 30 families living along riparian land in Manguo Swamp in Limuru are counting losses after property of unknown value was destroyed to facilitate construction of waterway. The families were forced to temporarily relocate after rainwater flooded their rental homes. The affected families are now accusing Kiambu County government of being malicious in diverting water from a swamp into their homes.
Tungeomba tu tafadhali kama ni serikali waangalie maisha ya watu ambao wanaishi katika hii bode.
People have encroached because utaona manyumba imejengwa all the way to Limuru. And as you know, nature has to take its course.
Meanwhile, youth in Tana River County have mobilized resources to support families displaced after the River Tana forced its way into Milalulu village. The youth under the banner Youth for Change distributed foodstuff to more than 300 affected families. More than 17,000 people have since moved to camps.
Tumeona umuhimu wa kuwatembelea, kuwasaidia na kile kidogo ambacho tuko nacho. So tunaomba wengine ambao wako na hiyo moyo waungane na sisi tupate kuwasaidia watu wetu.
and transport was paralyzed along the Njoro-Molo route after a section of the road was cut off following heavy rains that led to flash floods. Locals had to improvise ways to open the road by filling parts of the path with stones in a bid to ease movement along the route. According to locals, the floods that started 2 days ago following heavy rains have washed away some culverts which direct rainwater to the Kamwaura River.
Sisi imepepa hiyo mawe na tukasikia kuna watu kutoka Naiswet, watu 3 wamepotea na wachapatikana kufikia saa hii, na tunaendelea kuwatafuta kwa hii mtoni, pia tunaona hivi.
Embakasi Utawala tuko locked. Ungem Utanyahururu Kasuku Massive.
Jeshi ya Nyeri Coast Maua na Kura ko locked mbaya.
Kigumo Ward na ambao wote wako ndani ya KBC Channel 1.
Akulaliki Wednesday bila the ref.
Mbotela Auta Idara Kitengela.
Kiambu County 33 Pipeline Meru anawakilisha.
Rongai Maboxa pale go down. Karatina Auta Mlolongo wana enjoy show. Lare Sub County Auta Githurai 45. Lanet Barracks tuko ndani yake. Okongo Auta Carnation Maragwa Seti
Nairobi.
Fika wako locked mbaya sana.
Watu wangu wa Nakuru Ngwaro.
Auta Gilgil.
Live kutoka Mazeras Bahati Massive.
Embo Thika Massive.
Siaya Shikambi Kakamega Bungoma County.
Kusia Boda Kisumu City. Malindi yote iko ndani ya the ref.
When I'm in Kenya, I tune in to the rave. Get your mind brave, focus, conscious.
Kenya,
East Africa.
Right.
Keep it locked.
Calling out to Africa.
Kusaidiana. How can you help me?
Neza cause confusion kati ya Joel na Millicent. Kusi gani masikio hivi? Atemfanya nini?
Tosha ya nyumba.
Kazi yako ni kukuja tu huku unatutenganisha mimi na bei wangu.
Have a good day.
Good day gani na tayari saa haribu.
Pia ni Nancy amekubrainwash.
Joel hakani mtoto yote ambaye ni wake. Anawapenda wote sawa.
So mfahamu Joel naye.
Habari yako?
Wewe uko kila mahali.
Pia kwa huku. Kwani kuna tabu nyumbani?
Hati niliyo nayo ya kuolewa na wewe.
Wataka mambo? Basi tutakupasha.
Muone sura kama mbuzi ambaye amekarangwa kichwa chake na wewe. Nakwambia omba sana nisikuone na nisikupate. Kwa sababu utajuta siku ulozaliwa.
Na si umbea, la hasha.
Afu wewe mwanamke usipende kuingilia mambo yasiokuhusu. Uza mambo ya kuko wewe sio dobi.
Wewe usinyoshe kidole wewe.
Ni yale yanayojiri hapa mtaani.
Fanya hivi. Nifiche.
Hapana sitajificha wewe.
Tafadhali nakuomba.
Wacha akuje tumenyana.
Fanya hivi, sikiza bwana. Nipe.
Ofanyani.
Na panguo mume wangu.
And welcome back. Today on News Tech, we are discussing water sustainability and especially in urban areas amidst the COVID-19 pandemic and of course amidst the current floods that we have, plus sanitation and hygiene measures during this time. And joining me, we have Anthony Abungo, who is the CEO of WASPA, that is the Water Services Providers Association. And we have Mr. Edward Gedaiga, who is a youth leader at the National Youth Council. Gentlemen, karibuni sana.
Thanks.
Mr. Gedaiga, we were talking about how the youth, of course, the youths are in water vending businesses. They are also in a car wash businesses. Basically, they are in the industry.
Yeah.
And as the National Youth Council, we've talked about a lot of things that you two do. So my question is, have they reached out, or is the council reaching out, and especially at this time?
Okay. I do not want to bring the council politics because, you know, we also have governance issues in the council whereby you find that the secretariat is, you know, arbitrarily running things without involving the council. Because I'll give you an example. A council member is a delegate who was elected by the youth from the grassroots, right? And then there's a secretariat, because I told you it's semi-autonomous, right? So there is a part of government in us. And that's the people who have been given the secretariat. So the secretariat are not involving the delegates on the ground, so that if there is any project or anything that has to be communicated down to the youth concerning water, concerning the shortages, or also vice versa, be able to communicate up to even the gentleman here and other institutions, we have that issue. However, we are calling upon the youth as the council members to be able to, right, conserve water. Number one, you have to have a water tank. We know that there are so many roadside car washes around in Nairobi, and they don't have access to piped water. But they have access to spring water, access to, you know what I'm saying. If you can drive along the ring road along Lavington, you would find a big group of youth, and they've been there a couple of 3 years or something. So they need to start harvesting that water, so that then they get in touch with the water sector people and they put a tank in there so that they can be able to continue with their business. Secondly, even the water vending. And we appreciate what the gentleman is saying, and I do hope sincerely that the many young entrepreneurs who are out there selling water through the trucks and the vending, and because most of them are the ones employed in that sector, we do appreciate that. So that not just when we have a crisis, this should be a system, because as he said, the coverage of water availability in this country is not covered, and even in Nairobi, is not covered everywhere. So say like the informal settlements you just mentioned, they don't have access to water. We don't want to argue and debate about why there is no piping into that place, because you even wonder why there is no piping. But what we are saying, whatever resources is available that the youth are offering, kindly work with the youth on the ground. And we're also calling upon the youth also to take their ideas and their views, because this country will not be built by one sector alone. It is all of us.
We will still get to the harvesting part, and actually I would like to pose this question to Abuga. Water harvesting, what is the role of water harvesting authority and investing in water reservoirs as opposed to waiting always for water that flows?
A very good question. I did indicate that in the architectural framework governing the water sector, where we had the Water Act 202, this one was repealed, but we have Water Act 2016. But still, the architectural framework is almost similar, save for the fact that what the Act now recognizes, it recognizes water and sanitation service provision as a constitutional function of the county governments. They have been brought on board. National Water Harvesting and Storage Authority's mandate is to deal with issues of water security, construction of dams across the country. And I know from the ministry we have around 57 dams being constructed.
As we speak.
I don't want to wade into, you are aware about Itare Dam here in Nakuru.
Yes.
You are aware of Mwache Dam and others, including Aror, which I don't want to talk about. So that is purely their mandate. But the challenge that we have here is, if you look at categorization under the UN, Kenya is ranked as a water scarce country.
Yes.
Because the per capita threshold is 1,000 cubic meters. But what we have in Kenya is 452 meter cubed. And that was as per last year around May. So it is even going down. So this is what we say, look at rainwater, it is wasted. Look at groundwater, it's depleted. Look at surface water, it's polluted. So those are the challenges that we are facing now. But I would also want to challenge Kenyans. It is not only the mandate of government to harvest and store water. Look at our housing structures around. Do we have gutters? And this is a challenge to the county government. Make it mandatory before you do any approval for a construction of a house. One component that has to be there is a component of water harvesting. And if everybody was harvesting water in this country, we would be able even to contain some and reduce the impact of floods. Because we have done degradation. So you find that water is not absorbed by the trees, and also some of it that is coming from the roofs would be trapped into reservoirs. But they form now rivers and lakes. And look at the disaster that it is causing in the country. So far we have lost over 200 lives.
Yes.
So we can say that floods are even now more dangerous than COVID-19 in this country. And yes, it has to be declared as a national disaster. Look, I'm a resident of Budalangi, and I can tell you 3/4 is underwater. We are 83,000 in Budalangi. 46,000 have already been displaced on the southern
That's more
side.
than half.
Yes. Now we are squeezed into the remaining part, which is 1/4. People are taken into government facilities. Now, I think it has to be declared a national disaster so that the government can activate all instruments to take care of what is needed now is humanitarian support. You cannot go and now start building a dike. Water is everywhere. So what you need now is to take care of the people, to ensure that they have good sanitary conditions, they are able to get food, because everything has gone underwater. The infrastructure is totally destroyed.
Indeed. You wanted to add something?
Yes, I wanted to add that we are really saddened actually for the loss of lives, you know, and in fact, COVID-19, since it started about almost 50-something days.
Actually, it's exactly 2 months.
It's 2 months now. It's 60 days now,
13,
sorry.
yes.
Thank you for correcting that. 2 months, we haven't lost 200 people. So in a day or two...
In fact, it's 36.
In a day or two, we've lost over 200 people. So this shows us that it's a very, very serious. Even the rains we had last night, like we were discussing on the background, all over Nairobi, you could see the roads were flooded. They were like river streams, you know, rivers. All the roads were like rivers flowing downwards. So we're also saying that, look, each and every year, we've had this same thing happening. Anytime that we have excess rain, especially now that, you know, there's not a lot of global warming, so the earth is breathing, so, you know, the trees are now pulling in the water and the rains, and, you know, there's not so much pollution in the air. So we have all these floods and everything. But we are saying, what is the infrastructure that the government has put in place? Why should Kenya have 70% of young people? And they're not the ones being used to build these dams, dikes, reservoirs. Why? This country was not built by machines.
Without fairness,
I agree, but I'm saying the reason why we're still struggling, sir, is because we are not utilizing the #1 potential in this country, which is the youth. 1, they're educated. 2, they have the strength, right? And 3, they can take a risk. Unlike an old person, a young guy is more likely to take a risk in life. So that's why we're calling even on the leadership. Let's have a round table as well with youth leaders, including us ourselves, because we do not want to have a parallel government where we are saying the National Youth Council is running a parallel thing against the government. No, we want to work hand in hand, as it says in the National Youth Council Act, that youth have a governing body, which is the National Youth Council. And one of the things which has disappointed us with the Secretariat is that they have made the National Youth Council look like a state corporate, yet it is supposed to be simple a semi-autonomous body.
Okay.
Whereby by having, sorry, let me just conclude. By having, and that's why you see many solutions are not coming out from the ground, and I appreciate what this gentleman is talking about. But for our sector, we are asking the youth to look at the NYC Secretariat and tell them to involve them more in the governance.
Okay. Away from that, Mr. Bungo, somebody asks, how do you put an end to water rationing, which has been renamed equitable water distribution?
A very interesting question. I thought I had answered it. Is that basically our coverage is very low, and we are a water scarce country. I think we also need to learn from day zero in South Africa, because basically most of the wastage happens in the household. And I've always given a basic example. How do you brush your teeth in the morning? Do you draw water in a cup, or do you brush against a running tap? So if you brush against a running tap, you will end up using 5 liters.
Just to brush your teeth?
To brush your teeth. So if you have such like 10 characters in the house, you are using 50 liters to brush your teeth in the morning.
Okay.
You're seeing water conservation. So these are very, very critical areas. And if you look at the toilet, we can talk about the flush toilet. It consumes between 5 to 20 liters per single flush. So this is another area in terms of water conservation. But the challenge I've always said is I live on Naivasha Road, and we get water once in a week. But what we have always encouraged, and I like what you have said, is that store water. Because the simple question is that if you are salaried, how many times do you get a salary in a month? Once. But you are able to plan through the entire horizon.
Indeed.
So Kenyans should not expect that you'll have water in the taps 24/7. That is a lie. Those are only critical facilities. But what we ask them
Are we on the way to perhaps get to the 100% in Kenya?
Yeah, because the investment is coming, and I believe that by 2022 the target was to reach 63%. And I think the challenge is in terms of conservation, increased water security, and dams are critical in this because of the surface runoffs. But you can see where we have gone with the dams. Another governance issue altogether that I don't want to talk. So one is work on the water security. The water that we are talking that is killing people in Budalangi, I think plans have been put in place, and there was a dam to be put around Tongareni to harvest some of this water. So if you have security of that water, it will go towards water security in terms of irrigation, in terms of drinking water. So these are some of the things that can be put in place to ensure that we have water security in the country.
Indeed. And yeah, we will be getting back to the questions. In case you're joining us, this is News Check, and today we are discussing water sustainability, and especially in towns or urban areas. And looking at what we are having in the country right now, the floods are not making the situation any better. That is a discussion that we are having now with the CEO of Water Services Providers Association and youth leader of the National Youth Council, Edward Githaiga. And actually, a lot of youths have complained that a lot of things, a lot of policies have not actually touched them, and especially now that the COVID-19 pandemic is actually decimating the whole world. But as youth themselves, what would you encourage them, and especially on water harvesting? You heard what Anthony has given us, startling statistics. You use 5 liters if you use running water to brush your teeth. And actually, we have a big problem of water conservation.
Yeah, indeed. Youth have to take responsibility. I mean, you cannot be demanding from government that government is putting you outside and you yourself, you're not watching what you're doing. We are calling upon all the youth to take full responsibility in this time, especially now with COVID-19. We know a lot of even young people who are still drinking in the pubs, who are still going out drinking, who are still taking risks are young people. But that doesn't give you an excuse. When this COVID-19 kills you, it kills you. It doesn't care whether you're young, old, or anybody. So as young people, we should take responsibility. And also going back to what you were saying about the water harvesting. Water harvesting is not just water harvesting for drinking. Water is essential for agriculture. Majority of youth do not live in urban areas. They live in rural areas. So therefore, the youth should focus upon the environment that they have. Us who are in the urban areas, we do our own car washes and whatever to make our own ends meet. But we're calling on the majority of youth in the rural areas to harvest, to dig these dikes. For example, it's very unfortunate that a dam like Shinga Dam, which I'm sure you know, was dug by Mau Mau prisoners of war when they were young people. What are the youth doing? The youth have youth groups. The youth have organizations on the ground. Let them not wait for the government to come and give them support. It is their community, it is their environment, it is their water that they need to use properly. Where government comes in is to enable. For example, how many youth know that there are programs within the Ministry of Water that are doing irrigation, right? How many youth know that government is giving money for youth in agriculture, and it's supposed to be the modern day agriculture which is using drip irrigation? Very few. And why? If you want to know the news of the floods today, you go on internet and you search. So it shows you that the youth, we ourselves need to change our mindset. We need to be searching the right things online. We need to be looking for the right information which will empower us. Right now, we are more interested in music. We're more interested in the creative arts, listening to hip-hop, listening to reggae, and listening to, which is not bad, but those are extra curriculum in reality. They do not give you bread and butter. You need to focus as youth on things that will give you bread and butter, and the government, I'm sure, of the President Uhuru Kenyatta will be able to support you.
All right. Mr. Bungo, we talked about 50%, which is quite a low number considering the population of Kenya. What are other alternative sources of clean and accessible water that we can have, apart from relying on just the rains?
Normally what we do in our systems is that I think what we do, we abstract water from different places. If you go to Kisumu, they abstract from Lake Victoria. You go to Garissa, they abstract from River Tana. You go to Mombasa, you have the Baricho boreholes, which is serving Malindi, and you also have the Mzima Springs in Taveta. So they are different. And I think the easiest, because you cannot just be waiting for the rains to come, because water is basic and is needed today. So I think what is being done is that I've told you different mandates with different institutions. Now, when it comes to infrastructure development, this is largely done by the national government and now the county government. So, and I think the national government has put in place into programs, and this is where we want to see a lot of collaboration between national and county governments. And that collaboration is what will lead to, because the gap now that is there is also the infrastructural investment. Like now, where we are using water trucks to carry water and distribute, if you have the water infrastructure there, you don't need a water truck. So what we are doing also as an association is also to bring traction and also synergies, strategic partnerships between private sector and our utilities, so that we can have investments, more boreholes, more water systems, so that we can accelerate and expand. So it's both at the national level, being done by the national government, but we also want to be sustainable. And our sustainability, as I've told you now, is threatened. Because we are giving free water to the informal settlement. Number two, most people are not paying their bills. One, we can understand that is people have been in houses, and you realize that according to the World Bank report, around 89% rely on informal employment. So these are people who have to leave the house and do some work, then they get some money to make their ends meet. So that is a challenge. And now what we are requesting is that if this situation continues like this, because it seems that you will have COVID and you also have post-COVID. So it is some period of time. And this is where we are appealing strongly to the national government as water service providers. We are in the front line. As soon as water service provision collapses, then, because you cannot fight this invisible enemy with bullets. The bullets that are available now is water for disinfection, for cleaning of hands. And it is very effective, more than the sanitizers. Because the sanitizers, you have to prove it is 70% alcohol. But what happens when you wash your hands, and we have given protocols, around 8 steps, with water and soap, it is the outer layer of the virus is broken. And once it is broken, that kills the virus. It can't exist. So we encourage all Kenyans to continue washing hands. But we're also telling the national government and county governments, for us to continue providing water and sanitation service, then we require support in terms of subsidies, electricity, and chemicals to keep the war on. So the soldiers now is that we need the implements. You cannot send soldiers to a battlefront without ammunition.
Yes.
As soon as the ammunition takes out, then they'll have to retreat or they'll be killed. So our ammunition is to ensure workers are paid, chemicals are available, electricity is there. So that is the biggest challenge. And I think we'll be making a statement because most of the utilities in the coming days, I'm not sure, but the statistics show because collection is at 30%, we may be unable to provide water to Kenyans. So this is a red flag to the national government. Yes, we want to do it, but we have been forgotten because it is the consumer who is been supporting us. But the consumer is battered. Floods are here. The economy is down. People do not have money.
You also have the locusts.
We are chasing them to pay for water. We can't squeeze water out of the stone. Now, I think it is incumbent upon both levels of government because these are the taxpayers who are paying. When they die, who will be there to pay taxes? So it is important that some of these rights are in the human rights. And water is basic. So it behoves the national and county governments to play their role at this wave of the pandemic and support Kenyans, even if it means paying bills.
Yes.
The national government of Ghana has paid bills for 3 months for the entire country. We are not different. The government has the ability to do that. So we are talking of 1.7 billion per month. So 5.1 billion is a drop of sea if we have a budget of trillions in this country.
Indeed.
So
And
the governments can do that.
Yes. And of course, we were getting back to that when it comes to policies and perhaps legislation. You came up with a very good idea where we can decide that all plans to be approved, they must have water collecting facilities. But we will touch on that.
Yes.
Perhaps getting back to you, Gedaiga, the youth, of course, forming the biggest bulk when it comes to water business.
Yes.
With either being on sanitation, they have also the car washes, we have the selling waters. Even
Cleaning.
in some regions do that using donkeys.
Yes.
And have they been empowered more? Because we've seen car washes branded mostly by politicians.
Yes.
This was provided by, so as a youth council.
Yes, I think generally speaking, most of these initiatives have been youth-led. The youth themselves are the ones who have initiated them. What the politician has done during the election period, note that a lot.
Okay, it's not politicians alone. I've seen some branded by companies.
Yeah, sure, indeed.
Yes.
I mean, it's called corporate social responsibility, whereby society has to give to those who are less fortunate. But what we are saying is this. What Kenya needs, right, and I always going to speak from a youth perspective, is a youth Marshall Plan. And I don't want to give an example of the 1930s in the US, but I believe and strongly believe that Kenya, whether we hide it, whether we plaster it and make it up, Kenya is going through a great depression. That we have to admit. And also bringing into the crisis of COVID-19, which now has then further sunk this economy deeper than it was. And you heard him rightfully say that we're a country of trillions in terms of budget.
Yes.
So 5.1 billion would not be much.
Yeah.
However, I believe from a young person's perspective is, what can the government and the youth do together? And this was done very well in 1930 in the US. I want to give you an example of a president in the US called F.D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt, the 1930s after the World War, US was completely devastated. No jobs, no work, no infrastructure, old infrastructure, unemployment of the youth, hunger and the like. But he came with a big agenda which actually put the youth in the middle. So for example, right now we have a forest coverage of less than 6%. And the government's target is to reach, and this also contributes to water. Government target is to reach 10%. What the US did, they ensured that every youth in every locality or in every place, because there was no employment in the first place, was to adapt a number of trees and ensure for a period of 10 years they looked after those trees. Now if you go to the US, you find they have the forests, which are man-made. We are yet to get there. So we are calling upon our leadership in this nation, and I'm sure very well even the CEO can rightfully say, naturally all our leaders have traveled abroad, even to US, and they have seen how developed countries manage their systems. And they manage their systems by enabling young people to be able to thrive. When you have employment in a country, you're able to establish that country to grow economically. That means we will have more people contributing towards the tax payment, and we'll have more infrastructure being constructed in the water sector, in the agricultural sector, because when you have the majority of the population being utilized 10%, 20%, forget about those who are employed. I'm talking about those who are on the periphery. And this is why, as the National Youth Council members, not the Secretariat, are calling upon the youth to take responsibility and to work with this government now. Because if they do not work with it now, it is them who will not benefit. Thank you.
And perhaps looking at the conservation of water towers, of course, we know the government is doing something to do that in the conservation, but it's a bigger challenge, especially now we have the floods, right? Kindly comment on that.
Now, when it comes to the conservation of towers, you have an institution already which has been created to do that. And I think it is funded by the Exchequer. But beyond that, I think as an association, we have had part of our corporate social responsibility in terms, because we hold bi-monthly meetings. After every 2 months, we move into different parts of the country where we hold our meetings, caucuses of the MD, and we discuss the water issues. So as we do that, we also plant trees. The latest was done in Bomet in January. We were to do that, a bigger one, which was coming on the eve of the World Water Day. But unfortunately, that is when we had the declarations from government. But I think if you look at the Constitution, this is a duty that is incumbent upon every citizen in this country, that you also have to play a role. So apart from other institutions that are doing their part of corporate social responsibility, but everybody has a role to play. And in terms of looking at what is happening now, you will realize that if I take you to the component of sanitation, which is key, you realize we don't have good drainage systems even in Nairobi. So when it floods, it gets into the water sewerage infrastructure. Then what do you have? It bursts. So the challenge is not that the sewer infrastructure is because we don't have drainage. So water will find a route. It goes into the sewers. They burst. And you see there is a crisis now. I don't want to comment because it is in court, but the MD of Nairobi Water has been pulled into the court. So we have a crisis. You see, he's supposed to be running day to day, and he's before the court. So will he sort the problem of providing water? But you see, these are still the same government institutions working together. And I think these should go to mediation, not to a court. So we have to do justice to the Kenya people. So I think we have a duty, all of us, to contribute to conservation of the environment.
And if I may point out on that issue of Nairobi County, I mean, this is non-political, but so to speak, Nairobi Water Company has been mad a lot with corruption. And it's only until the governor, Mike Mbuvi-Sonko, came in that we actually started seeing an increase in supply. I mean, that you have to give the governor of Nairobi. I mean, that one increase, even, I'm sure you'll agree with me there. Because you remember even there's a time in Dakaine Dam, the cartels which were running the water, because you see there was a cartel system here that was very much thriving. And it had misused this institution of the Nairobi Water Company. And they used to shut some canals. You know, the water that's supposed to come into Nairobi, they shut it down, and then it offloads back into the river, rather than that water coming now into Nairobi. we've seen the governor traveling even to Dakaine Dam and sorting those kind of issues. And then coming now down here to Nairobi Water Company. When you go to the estates in Kayole, in Buruburu, in Mukuru Kwajenga and other places. Now these cartels had upgraded and downgraded. They are up there at the management level, and they are down here at the distribution level, ensuring that every poor person, you're buying a jerrycan of 20 liters per day, and a household will need about 5 or 6, 7 jerrycans per day at 20 bob. And the average income of a Kenyan youth is $1 a day. So this issue has to be looked into, and that is why we're even calling upon now that the Nairobi Metropolitan Service has come in place, and the Nairobi government of Mike Mbuvi Sonko to work together now, especially, sir, so that these issues of water can end once and for all, and the people of Nairobi can benefit from that water. And us as the youth, we are ready to be employed. We are ready to be used as watu wa mkono because we love this country.
Okay. And I can see a tweet by Dube Ismail Ali. He's talking about Budalangi and Tana River being the worst affected. And he's talking about it being every year. I think we should find a lasting solution. We talked about policies and perhaps advocacy and legislation when it comes to even perhaps plans of the house plans and buildings. So what other measures can we actually add on top of that, even if it's legislation?
What I can talk about that, I'm not a flood expert, but what I can say is that from what I know about Budalangi is what you need to do, because whatever comes in is the surface runoff. It is raining in Cherangani and coming downstream. So you need to offload some of this rainwater, and damming is one of the solutions that has been put in place. And in terms of River Nzoia also, you find it has silted over the years. So what is required, even the problem that is facing Budalangi now, is that when you go at the delta now, there is a lot of silt. So instead of the water pushing into the lake, the water is now coming back. And now the water level in the lake has risen because of climate change. It is affecting Tanzania, it is affecting Uganda. I'm told even Entebbe is flooded. So what is happening, the water is not now going into the lake. It is the lake now that is coming into the land.
Yes.
So you can see, apart from also building permanent dikes, you also maintenance of the river, which is done in other countries. You need to widen the channel. Then I think activities that you youth can benefit, this is where you need components like the amphibian dredger. This is a dredger that can float in water and go and scoop the sand. So that is another source of income because it is needed for construction. And that one can be used for the youths. So you have damming, you also, and that water is taken to irrigated agriculture, another source, agribusiness for the young people, because now agriculture is technology, and we are talking about Agenda 4. That one can equally support that, because we have land that is lying idle. I know even in the Tana Delta, that we have a lot of land, and if you are able to do damming and direct this water for agricultural activities, then it will help also improve the economy.
And Abungo, still on the same, Gidaiga.
Yes.
I can see somebody talking about we should be compensated because it's a recurring problem. Do you think actually something should be done? Because every time we are told Bundalangi, Tana River, Agarissa also has the same problem down at the coast.
And I think that gentleman is right. If we were in the, in the ideal world, where you sue people because of lack of service provision. But again, it boils down onto the leadership that we elect, right? And including like Budalangi, who are the elected leaders of that region? What is it that they go to campaign for every time they are telling their voters? I'm sure one of the main points of I will bring change, I will ensure that there is no more flooding in Budalangi, and yet again it comes. But anyway, let's not play blame game. What we need is a more coordinated approach towards dealing with these issues of flood. We know that the government, like he has rightfully said, has got those many water body sectors that are working together. And once and for all, now, more, like I was telling him, More than we invest in roads, we need to invest in water. More than we invest in roads. As much as we want our harvest to go to the market, that harvest cannot be able to, you cannot be able to plant or harvest without that water. So that means water is a foundational investment for any country. So therefore, we are calling on the government, and it's very unfortunate that he couldn't mention, but I can also mention the Arol Dam and the corruptions and very
okay. Besides that, because actually the matter is already in court.
Yes, I'm sure we can't talk about it.
Yes. I wanted us to look at the Kenyan module, as even foreign media are reporting that East Africa has been quite hit by the floods. What is the module of the Kenya compared to other countries? Because perhaps we should borrow a leaf from another country. And on resource allocation, Mr. Bongo, do you believe we should give more on the same if we are not going to declare it a national disaster, with more resources, if it's actually money or even manpower?
No, I think the first thing is to declare it a national disaster. Okay. Once you declare it a national disaster, we have a lot of humanitarian agencies. Now they'll have to come on board because a proclamation has been issued by the government to activate support from these institutions and other parts of the world. And what I can say is that you find that even DRC Congo, I saw a clip, is affected.
Yes.
This is an issue of climate change, whatever is happening now. It's not only affecting Kenya. It's a number of countries that have been affected. And I think the government went ahead a few years ago and established the Climate Council, which is chaired by none other but the president himself. But unfortunately, it has been unable to execute or prosecute its duties, simply because somebody went to court. I don't know what the problem is. But this is something that requires proper planning, just in the entire country, because you cannot contain only floods in Budalangi or in Tana River. We are talking of slides now.
Yes.
Even one of the MDs of the utilities said now, like, the entire reticulation system, you see, once there is a landslide, what happens? Then that infrastructure is uprooted. So those customers, you cannot supply them. They are displaced and go to a place where there is no supply, where you had your infrastructure. So the problem is bigger, and it requires good planning, strategic planning over time, instead of being reactive. Because what we can react to now is what we call the humanitarian support. But now what happens after the floods have gone away? You will find another cycle of drought. Now you will find that cows, cattle is dying, people, because of lack of food. You can see now, that one has become now a pendulum. You move from floods, you go to drought. You move from drought, you go to floods. And this requires planning, as he has put it. The issue of Budalang is not about leadership. Where it has reached now, it requires massive national scale investment, because it is coming all the way from Mount Elgon. Nobody can stop it. And that is where you need institutions now to come together and synergize. The problem is that we have multiplicity of institutions. I can give you, there is a project on World Bank in Budalang, around 10 billion. Then you have the component of diking, which is one of the solutions. It is not a panacea to all the problems in Budalangi. Then there is also the one for Lower Nzoia, the irrigation project. What has been forgotten is water supply. So what we can talk now is all the land is under water. The people who are displaced need water. There is no water. You can see the challenge. So in terms of priority, drinking water ranks higher than water for irrigation. So I think we also need to put our priorities right when we are conceptualizing such projects. And that is why inclusion of the community involved is very, very important. And I'm happy to report that as utilities, I've been a managing director for almost 6 years. We have embraced the component of youth. When we are doing these kiosks for the informal settlement, our first priority is to give to the youth organizations to run. When you are doing trenching, you bring them to do it at the community level. And I have an organ that already I'm activating, the young water professionals. It is here in Nairobi, and we had planned by June, we have a caucus for all the youth, because we are looking at, in terms of innovativeness, we look it at the youth. Because we want now to because technology is a driver of water service provision. You are talking of billing systems, you are talking of receiving your bill on phone, you are talking of an application for water like in Eldoret. Those are the young people. So we want to look into succession, because I'll be exiting the sector for some time, but you also need knowledge management. The knowledge that I've gathered has to be also transferred to the other people. So we are looking at mentoring, and I'll be looking for you so that we can synergize. We want to use your numerical strength to ensure that we achieve SDG number 6.
That's very encouraging. But guys, we have a very thin line in Kenya between the drought and the floods. What exactly a lasting solution? Because actually from floods, it's a drought, and actually it's a recurring process each and every day. The dikes, the drainages. Kindly comment on that.
There's no reinventing the wheel. The wheel was already invented in Egypt in the ancient days. Look at the Nile. The Nile flows from Lake Victoria all the way to Egypt. And it's a seasonal flood in Egypt. A seasonal, massive. The banks of the Nile extend so far. But what did they do in those ancient days? They harvested that water. They moved it out there. So, because after every flood, and it's a natural phenomenon, you have drought. You understand? It's natural. It's a global. It's a natural occurrence. It's not that because it's in Kenya that drought flood follows each other. No, it's the environment, right? So in Kenya as well, that is what we need to invest in. What we do with our water. We need to build canals, irrigations, dams, like you were saying, all those. And we now not need to play. We now not need to be corrupt. We now need to be committed to those agendas, because Kenya has the best policy. I cannot say any other country in Africa that can defeat the water policy of Kenya or the ideas, like he said. In fact, now we have been
there.
They're there. Everything is there. The thing that we need, and that's why we are saying we appreciate the war on corruption, and I'm sorry to bring this issue here, but it's affecting us, and it's affecting to why we have more floods and why we have more droughts. Because that money, if it's not channeled properly, it goes to the wrong place. Therefore, we are calling on His Excellency to form this committee that will see post-COVID-19.
Yes, actually, and when we come back, I want us to look at post-COVID, because I believe there's a lot that we should be looking at right now as we wait for this pandemic to end. Right, Mr. Abongo? But we are taking a short, quick break. In case you're joining us, this is Channel 1 News Check. But when we come back, more discussion on water. And do remember, our opinion question is, should we declare as a country, should the current floods be declared a national disaster? It's already on your screen. Should the current floods be declared a national disaster? At Ben Troy Njue, at KBC Channel 1. Thank you so much for the comments. And also, we are live on Facebook. Let's have that break.
Do you have any clue? Siamak, your father has other sons too. To save him from the embarrassment,
I found out that my father is in Patliputra.
How did you get to know about
Acharya
it?
Chanakya told me. But he is not telling me who.
They killed your grandfather, you know. And they set your hut on fire.
I've learned how to please the authority in order to use the power in my favor.
Acharya Chanakya cannot hide the truth in front of Emperor Bindusar. Do you know who my father is?
Yes.
I must tell the truth to His Highness.
Coronavirus COVID-19 is a respiratory virus spreading across the world. The infection is spread from droplets of coughing and sneezing of an infected person, touching or shaking hands, or being in contact with contaminated surfaces or objects with the virus. The signs and symptoms are fever, coughing, headache, body ache, difficulty in breathing. The disease can be prevented by regularly washing hands with soap and running water. Avoid close contact with people who have flu-like symptoms. Avoid handshake, hugs, and kissing. Also, protect yourself by covering your mouth or nose using a disposable tissue while coughing or sneezing. If you experience these symptoms and you had traveled or been in contact with a person from a country reporting COVID-19, you should isolate yourself for 14 days. Dial *719# or call 719. This message has been brought to you by the Government of Kenya and its partners.
It's always a pleasure having you. Welcome back. This is News Check. Remember, on our opinion question, we're asking, should the current floods be declared a national disaster? Nyanduchas or Chenges, you don't say where you are watching us from, but you're saying it's long overdue. And gentlemen, when we are talking about the water policy, you said that Kenya could be having the best, one of the best water policies that an African state can have. So the question is, Abugo, do you think and do you concur that the biggest problem is not on the policy, it's on the implementation?
Very true. What did Singapore do? Look at them in terms of water coverage. They are at 100%.
100%?
Yes, Singapore. Because you find they just looked at the policies we had at independence. Some of these Asian tigers, we were at par. And that is why we are saying the crisis even in water is a crisis of governance. So what we need to quickly do is fix our governance issues. Once we are able to fix governance, and we have a good even constitution, look at the national values sitting in Article 10. Sustainable development, all those ones are there in terms of good corporate governance. But at the end of the day, do we pay fidelity to what is in the constitution? It is thrown away. So that is the problem. And I think if we have, I agree with him, what we need to do now is scale down the rhetoric and get into action. Because even if it is in terms of resources, resources are available. See what the Kibaki's government did with the Thika superhighway that we have now. It was around only 27 billion. So there is a lot of good plans that have been put in place. You talk of Budalangi, it is there. I was talking to a professor based in the US, a flood expert, and he told me everything, the designs have been done. They're just rotting somewhere in the shelf. So I think we need now to get serious because of posterity, because we are not here for long. We are here for a limited time. And we will be accountable for some of these problems that will bedevil our generations to come. So I think it behoves us, we have a duty, we have to move down and quickly fix our issues. So we have to move out of being selfish and be selfless. So to me, that is what I think. And if we are able to do that, then we'll fix the problems because the solutions are known. The finances are available. But what is needed is there a structure that is able to absorb the finances well until whatever you want to fix is realized. Because the problem is that you have the solution, but at the end of the day, you find that the money that was allocated to that project is nowhere to be seen, and the project has not been completed. So this one is also winning donor confidence. Because if donors have to continue supporting this country, and we are way above, we have achieved the middle income status. So we no longer rely on grant. And that is why in the water sector, as water companies, we are looking at what is called now financial sustainability, to be independent so that we can also attract commercial financing. A number of companies, so that we make attractive balance sheets. We give a business case that if you invest 2 billion here, we are able to repay it within 3 years, and 30,000 people will be connected. So I think that is the model that is happening. You go back and look at the Netherlands. I've been there. They pay dearly through their nose in terms of maintaining the dikes. If there is a worst country, then it should be Netherlands. But they have contained their water problem. If you look at Schiphol International Airport, it is 6 meters below the sea level. If it breaks, they're all dead. But they have been able to manage it so that when you have a lot of water in the sea, that's why it's called Amsterdam. There's a dam within the city. So they just change. They get the water from the dam back to the lake, the sea, and the water to the sea. They just play with it. Then you can have canals for sport. You can have the water now. People are moving around the city. Instead of using, also investing in roads, invest in canals. So canal is another form of transport. So you will be able to contain the water within the canal. So there are several, I think, what I can say, ways that this can be contained.
All right. Before you talk about policy, we are the one who came up with that. Talking about how Kenya has a good water policy, but we are taking we're also crossing over. First of all, let's cross over to CS Munya, who is having a press briefing as we currently speak.
Which was an economic stimulus project that was intended to spur development in the rural areas, and that was targeted at the local level. And it had a big component of aquaculture development that supported fish pond, development of fish pods, fish feeds, fingerlings, and organization of the community to support fish farming. And as has been observed by those who spoke before me, there are gaps within that project, especially on the marketing and processing side. And this project is therefore intended to expand what was done and at the same time sort out those gaps that were there in terms of supporting the marketing bit of it, the infrastructure for processing that was also missing. That is what this project is all about. You have already been told how many counties are involved, counties both in central and eastern Kenya and western Kenya that have been selected to spur this project. Of course, we have many other projects. There is no part of Kenya that is not covered by projects. So don't keep asking why those particular counties. Because there are other counties also being supported by another project. And there are other counties being supported by another project. So the way the projects are structured and spread, there is no particular part of this country that is not supported. And counties choose the value chains they want supported in their own areas. Some would want livestock because that is their mainstay. Others would want dairy because it's their mainstay. Others would want fish. Maybe it's their mainstay, or they want to start. They think that is where they have a niche or they have a gap. So that is why we are here, and therefore, basically, this is a ceremony to launch vehicles that are going to be used by the counties to supervise, to do the field work that is required to make these projects successful, provide the mobility that is required. Esther has given you most of the details, and therefore what we are going to do is just have this speech circulated to you so that you can be able to pick the details that may be missing from whatever else we have said. That is the first program we wanted to launch this morning, and I'm sure we will flag off the vehicles as we leave to send them to the counties. And I'm happy to see that there are county representatives here who have come to pick these vehicles. And as you have been told, we hope that these vehicles will be used for this project. These vehicles are not going to be personnel vehicles for transporting you from your home to your office. They have been bought for a particular purpose for which we expect they will be used for. And indeed, we are going to do monitoring and evaluation to make sure that those vehicles are not diverted from this project and passed on as vehicles for other purposes for which they are not for. Because those other purposes, I'm sure you also have resources to buy vehicles for transporting yourselves to. They are basically for monitoring and making this project successful on the ground. That is one of the points I wanted to make. The other point I would want to make is that these projects, majority of these projects are actually debts. Government is borrowing and repaying, so it's not free money. That I would like that to be very clear. This is not philanthropic money. It is money through a negotiation government has borrowed and they will repay. The Kenyan taxpayer will carry the burden of repaying this money. And therefore, we would want this money utilized properly on the ground to support livelihood and in grown businesses that will pay taxes to repay the money. Otherwise, if this money is diverted to do other things, then we completely betray the public that is going to shoulder the burden of repaying this money. And therefore, we would want to strengthen the audit units. In fact, we will be looking into this project to be sure we have enough human resources and the skills to do proper auditing, to ensure that these resources are utilized for purposes for which they have been given. We owe it to our country, we owe it to the population, and we owe it to the people of Kenya, whom this money is supposed to help. And therefore, I wanted to actually say that we are going to relook into the way these projects are structured to make sure we fill those gaps where there could be loopholes, where there could be gaps that would allow misuse or misdirection of these resources away from the purposes that they are intended for. I've seen, especially the coordination of these projects is wanting. We want to see how we can restructure the coordination element within the projects to make sure they are done extremely well for the purposes that they are intended for. Thirdly, these resources, especially that are going to the counties, are resources that are actually national government resources that are being given to the counties to carry out a development purpose. If you look at the structure of the constitution, it will be very clear. It is actually conditional grants. If you look at the window within which these resources are being channeled to the counties, they are conditional grants. Therefore, they are resources sent to the counties attached with certain conditions. Those conditions must be met. If the money is meant to help a women group, it has to go to the women group. And the criteria are very clear how it reaches the women group. If it is for a youth group to go and do a fish pond, it has to go there. And that's why I'm saying the monitoring element and the accounting element must be strengthened moving forward. The other point I want to say is that we have also seen counties launching these projects and passing them as county projects and even using those forums to criticize national government, saying national government is not effective. And saying national government projects are not reaching the ground. You are launching a national government project, handing over checks from national government, and you are saying national government projects are not reaching on the ground. It is stupefying and totally bizarre. I saw that happening in Imeru yesterday, where NARIC project checks were being given to groups. And I saw the leadership there criticizing national government and saying, make sure your money reaches the farmers the way this money is reaching, the way this money we are giving is reaching. I really want to discourage you from that approach because it's not going to work. We are not saying national government shouldn't be criticized or questioned, but if the national government has facilitated those resources and organize and make sure that money is there, now your work is to distribute the money, I would think you would say that this is an example of a very successful national government initiative that is reaching those women groups and those groups you are giving the money. And we would also want to encourage that our development partners who are supporting us in these projects, the national government, be also participating in those projects at the local level. National government officers down there are the eyes and ears of the national government, which is the guarantor of this project and which is the one that is repaying these projects. We want to see our officers at the local level participating in the project so that they can also be helping us in monitoring and ensuring that these projects reach the people, and so that when we are writing reports, we have accurate reports that actually indicate that these resources are reaching the people. So when we are restructuring the monitoring and the evaluation program, we want to, at that level, those officers who are there to be part of it. I don't see why they are kept away. They are kept away from the project. Therefore, they don't know, and when it is being passed, it's being passed as if the national government is not part of it. So I thought that it's very important I say that point. We are not saying don't be happy or proud about what you are doing, but please be happy and proud about your own things, and also acknowledge the contribution of the national government there. Tunaelewana? Mimi sina mengine kwa hiyo project. Tutaenda we are going to launch the hand over the vehicles, and we want now to move to another program we were launching today, which we actually started on the other side. And I will invite, we've been engaged in the locust containment effort for a long time now, over 5 months, because we started in December. Now we are in May, and we've done a lot of work together again, the national government, the counties, because we have been working with the counties, and our development partners, coordinated by FAO. We've made a lot of strides in containing the locust menace that has been ravaging the country. And we've been giving you reports on the progress, and we would want to say that we've done extremely well. At one point, locusts were reported in 27 counties. Right now, they are in less than 5 counties. That tells you our containment efforts have been very successful. In fact, I would say from the latest reports, they are largely in, remnants. Remnants of locusts are in Marsabit, Turkana, Samburu, and Isiolo. And our efforts to eradicate them, even in those counties, is still on. We have our teams on the ground, spraying and monitoring and giving reports, both ground spraying teams and also aircrafts that are spraying, and also aircrafts that are doing surveillance. And therefore, we want to acknowledge and thank all the teams across the ground in all the bases, both at the national level and the county level, for their contribution in making this effort successful. We also want to thank our development partners for the support they have given us this far, sometimes in helping us mobilize resources from other development partners, and also providing us with personnel and expertise to work together with our own expertise in our ministry to drive this intervention project. And we are announcing today now we've reached a watershed in this fight, where now we are launching an assessment team that is going now to go on the ground to assess the damage and give us a report so that we can be able to work out on the interventions that are intended to support livelihoods and families and people who have been affected by the locust invasion. I know we've been telling you we are going to do the assessment, and we've been changing our goalposts, but the change of goalposts is not intentional. It is the preparation and the work needed to get the resources and get the right people to go and do this work. So we are pleased to announce that actually today this work starts, and FAO, our partners, have been able to recruit the Red Cross, the Kenya Red Cross, who have already started the preparatory work to send the teams on the ground how we are going to do this work. I want to thank FAO again for this work and also welcome the Red Cross as our new partner in this assessment work. And this assessment work is going to involve also assessing the impact of our intervention so that we are able to have a feedback. We are able to know, did we do it very well? Where did we fail? What gaps do we have in the future? What can we do better? So apart from looking at the damage and giving us that report to work out on the interventions, they will also be looking at the work we have done so far and the impact it has also had and the effectiveness of those interventions. So I think it's a holistic assessment that they are going to undertake. And therefore, without much ado, I will just invite Tobias, FAO Country Director, to say something, and then...
That is a live feed from the Kilimo House, where Agriculture CS Peter Munya is giving a report or an update of food assessment in Kenya. Of course, he has talked about the locust and he said great strides have been made. And actually, he's talking about remnants of the desert locust. Actually, it's a menace that had affected Kenya since end of last year, beginning of this year, and the COVID-19 has not made the situation any better. In case you're joining us, this is News Check. I'm Ben Troy Njue, and I have two guests. And because of the interest of time, we're going to pick up the pace. We have some few minutes talking about water sustainability and amidst the COVID-19 sanitation and hygienic measures, which also go hand in hand with water and more water when you talk about the floods that we are having in Kenya. 1 minute, gentlemen, each. Currently, we are having the desert locust. At least we've been informed by the minister that it's just almost over. Then we have the COVID-19. And is there a challenge for food security, looking at the floods that we are having? Abogo?
Ordinarily, yes, because in terms of floods, you realize that normally this is the period that cultivation is being done across the country because of the long rains. So most of the farmlands are submerged. So that one entirely is going to affect the food security. Because once it is flooded, some of the crops that we have cannot sustain for long. They'll eventually die off. So that is a great challenge, and I think now the government needs to plan ahead, looking at the stock in terms of strategic reserves that we have in the country, and plans that can be able to be made if it is getting more like maize, to just boost the strategic reserve. And again, you look now at the humanitarian aspect. So that means it will have a great impact even on the strategic reserves. You need to get some of this food stuff to the people. So I think it is important that that one is going to affect already the food security in the country. Because when you have continuous rain that does not support agriculture, then that is also a challenge to the nation.
Yes, thank you very much for actually hosting us today, and we do appreciate.
You're welcome.
Yes, this issue about floods obviously is going to be a food security matter. I mean, because once the flood submerges the plant, then the plant does not...
Actually, thousands of acres have been ready.
It's really enormous. Even coronavirus is not near to the epidemic we're expecting from the floods and the like. So therefore, that's why we're saying, even to His Excellency, because even I'm sure he watches KBC.
Yes.
One major thing is that you need to reconfigure your government. I know we had the Big Four agenda plans, and we had many other plans of infrastructure and expansion and railway, whatever. Please, 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 You've given the coordination to the minister. He knows what projects are there. That's Mr. Matiang'i. He knows what is there, what is available, what is ready in terms of projects. Cut down this project expenditure and focus the resources 100% in dealing with COVID-19, in dealing with the locust issue, in dealing with the flood issue, and dealing also with the humanitarian issue.
Okay.
And especially now with the COVID-19, channel that budget. And we appreciate there's a youth, we appreciate the government of Uhuru Kenyatta with the Vijana Mashinani program, which is targeting youth in terms of employment. And right now we've just had CS Munya as well, saying there's an economic stimulus in the agricultural side. We thank them for that. But we hope they will do much better. Because we do not want a disaster.
Yeah, and this question in 10 seconds, Mr. Abungo, we are talking about post-COVID measures when it comes to water and sanitation in Kenya. Have we put any in place, or are there policies that are already on the ground?
I think that is a very good question, because this is what we are looking at, and our message to government is utilities are cash-strapped.
Yes.
They do not rely on government exchequer. They are basically run from water bills paid by consumers, and we know where the economy is now. People are unable to pay their bills, so we are talking at 30% collection efficiency.
Yes.
So we can't be able to service our salaries, which is 900 million, electricity and chemicals, around 1.4 billion, and other expenditures, which were pushing it 1.7. So April, most utilities have tried, and they have paid their salaries, of course, net, struggling. But the major challenge that is facing us now is chemicals. You see, chlorine is imported.
Yes.
And India and China, where these are the major suppliers, they were under lockdown. So you realize that we really need quick government intervention in terms of supporting the utilities to stay afloat. So our message is that we need the utilities to be cushioned, because it will be dangerous now to have a pandemic, then welcome an epidemic like cholera.
Yes.
Because you realize that when you don't have access to safe and clean water, then the danger is that you'll have other infectious diseases. So the big question is that, is the government prepared to handle a pandemic and another epidemic? So the answer is no. So it is important to move in terms of preventive healthcare by ensuring that there is water. Because statistics show us that daily 1,000 infants die.
Because of waterborne diseases?
Because of lack, of access to either safe, clean water or sanitation. So that tells you that that one is even dangerous than the COVID itself that we are talking about. So I think measures need to be put to contain. Now with the floods and there is a humanitarian crisis, people have been moved to higher grounds. Social distancing is not being observed, so you need to come up with the sanitary conditions, and you also ensure that they have access to safe and clean water. So what we are, as he has said, I know the government is reconfiguring, but the government needs also to accelerate. They need to expedite. As more of being reactive, they need now also to do a little bit of planning to ensure that this situation is alleviated in time. Because what is required is resources. Resources.
Thank you indeed, gentlemen, but our time has run out. I've been speaking to Anthony Bungo, who is the CEO of the Water Services Providers Association, and Mr. Edward Githaiga, who is a youth leader at the National Youth Council. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for making time and for your insight. Of course, we had a lot we could discuss, including the duplications of, we have so many agencies that that cater about or look at issues of water in the country, and the Kenyan want clean, accessible water. Thank you so much for watching and for participating, for all those who sent their text, those who sent their tweet, and those who were communicating on Facebook. I'm Ben Troy Njue. Lensa apologies. I'm informed it's Lucy Mwaura has been our sign language interpreter for this afternoon. Tamrin is coming up next.